Welcome to this video for the course Game Programming. My name is Paul and today I'm going to make a program in which I'm going to create an entire new class. And you've already heard the concept of a class as a group of methods. And normally it's not just some group of methods, but always methods that belong together because they belong to some kind of object that plays a role in your game or other program. And in this example, I'm going to create a class for the object die, or dobbelsteen in Dutch. And I've already prepared a small program with the main method. And what I'm going to do is create a dobbelsteen, and I will use it. And I will use it in this way. So I have a method play dice. And what I'm going to do, well, there's some errors here because I haven't created the class yet. So I'm going to create some objects of this class die. And of course, what do you do with dice? You throw them and then you read out the number of eyes that is on top and you use them in a game. And we're not going to create a full game, but just the die. And so we are just printing out the number of eyes you have thrown. So let's start creating the class. So any class definition starts with the word class. And I'm going to call it die. So now I have this class. You see there's already some stuff changing here because now it doesn't give an error anymore on the declaration of die, but on the missing method. So we'll have to create something inside this program, this class die, to make this work. And of course I'm going to create these two methods, and I also need a variable because we need to know what the number of eyes that is thrown, what that number is. So I'm putting in this variable. So there's two methods, and one is easy. That is the method getEyes. So I'm going to write it first. It returns an int because it tells us what the number of eyes is. Oh. And it just returns this variable that we have in our class. So then we need a method to throw the die, and I'm going to put it in here. And this is a method that doesn't have a return value because it just changes the state of the die by changing the number of eyes thrown. And we want to do that in a random way. So I will create a void method throw die. And what we want to do is change this variable. Well, to what? So what we really want here is a random number, and I'm going to use this also to show you how to browse and to look in the documentation of C#. So I'm just going to look for something that is like random. Well, here it says there is a class system.random represent a pseudo-random number generator, a device that produces a sequence of numbers that meets statistical requirements for randomness, which is really a nice statement of what it does. Really, there's a word pseudo here because generating random numbers is really hard for computers. For people, it's quite easy. Just drink a few beers and throw darts at the dartboard and you have a random generator. But computers execute fixed programs, and it's very hard to produce a random number. And I'm going to change the program in a while to and explain more about that. So let's see what this class random has to offer. Well, if I press the dot, I just get two things that really don't suit me. So I can check off if this is equal to something else. So that isn't really helpful. But what I can do now is, what happens if I do it like this? I will create a random object. So now I have this object R, and I can find out if there's non-static methods in this object that I can use. And now there's something more happening, and I can see here, perhaps you remember the documentation said there's a sequence of random numbers. So next might be something useful. Returns a non-negative random number, and there's two overloads. So let's get this and then type and see two overloads. Well, this is always happening in the video, of course, so let's try it again, because it should be showing what. Now it works. Now I can select the overloads there are. There's an int random next with no arguments, but there's also one that has a max value, and this seems perfectly suited for our purposes. So let's see what it does. It returns a non-negative random integer that is less than the specified maximum. So if I put 6 here, then I will get a random number between 0 and 5, and that's not really good for this guy. So, but if I add 1, I will get a number between 1 and 6. So this is exactly right. Now, there's one more thing about the position of this, the creation of this random variable. What happens now is whenever I throw the die, I will create a new variable random r. And that's not a good thing to do, and that has to do with the problems computers have in generating random numbers. And it may very well happen that if you start the sequence again, you'll get the same sequence as the first time. So if I leave it like this, I could very well end up with a die that always throws 1. So I'm going to move this, and I'm just putting it here. So now I have only, at the moment I make a die, I will create this random variable, and then I will use it whenever I throw the die without creating a new one. And I'm going to add static to. And this means that all the dies that I will create, so die 1 and die 2, will use the same random sequence. So this will give the best result. Well, I finished the class die, but on top there's still some error messages. And let's look what they say. And it says here, throw die is inaccessible due to its protection level. And the way it is that classes are like black boxes. So everything inside them is in general private to themselves. And the things you want to be visible for the outside world and the methods that can be used, you will have to make them public so you can use them. And I'll just do that right here. And if you do that, you'll see the error messages will disappear. And the word public is a so-called access modifier, and there's some more of them, and we'll talk about them later on. But now that we've made these two methods public, we can run the program. We'll leave the variables. These are the private businesses of the class die, so it will manage these two variables here, and the outside world doesn't need to know about their existence. So let's run the program. So I throw a 1 and a 5, and if I run it again, the random works, I get a 2 and a 6. So there's one more thing I want to do, because we've talked about it earlier, but there's the word static and non-static. And I've used a static random here, so we have a random generator for all our dice. And I want to add another static variable to show how this works. And what I'm going to do is make the number of faces the die has. I will make that changeable. And for instance, now we have all dice with 6 faces, but you might imagine a game in which you have dice that have 10 or 12 or 20 faces. So I'm going to create a variable int number of faces equals 6 at the beginning. That will tell me how many faces the die has. And of course, to make this method use this variable, I have to type it here as well. And to go with this, I will make a method to change that value. So I'm going to make a public void set faces. And of course this has a parameter, the new value. It will set the number of faces to the new value. Now what I'm going to do is make this variable static. This means that for all instances of the die, the number of faces will be the same. So if I cannot use now a 6-faced die and a 10-faced die in one game. They all have the same number of faces, every object in the class. And this is what the word static means. And to match that, I'll also make this method static. And we have to watch for the placement of the variable of the keyword. And now we're going to use these two methods. Like to change the number of faces, I can now call this static method by just using the class name. And you see set faces appear here. And let's set it to 100 to have a clear difference. So let's run it. And now you see I can get really large values with this pair of dice. If I were to try to call that on one of the two dice, and I will get an error message. It cannot be accessed with an instance reference because it's static. And so there's two types of methods. So the static methods you can call on the class. So I have to restore this. And the instance method, like throw die, who is non-static, I must call on the instance. And if I try to put the class name here, and now I get an error message here. An object reference is required for a non-static field. This method is non-static, so I have to call it on an object. If I were to the same would go if I would put it here. And of course this is logical in a way, because you can't ask the class how many eyes there are on a throne, because it will say, well, there's perhaps 10 or 20 instances and they've all got a different number of faces showing, so the class can't answer that. So this is the end of this video. Of course there's been a few shortcuts, so many more things about classes will pass by later on, but this is a first example. Thank you for watching.